All right. Well, it didn't take long. It was just like a few hours until Elon Musk decided to buy Twitter that all of a sudden there was a massive freak out online yesterday, watching all of these corporate liberal lackeys who make their money off of keeping voices suppressed and marginalized freaked out yesterday. And I'm talking about the types of people, and yes, we can say shit libs, but the types of people who would push a Bernie Sanders off a cliff rather than they would happily push him out of the way to elect a corporatist Democrat, someone like a Hillary Clinton or others, to keep the machine going, to keep the machine running and burning and churning the way it is, the Wall Street machine. And that's what we saw yesterday.
I don't know. What you're describing, though, is someone with a lot of rational thought, right? I think that most of the people who are having a melty baby moment about Twitter's acquisition by Elon Musk are not as rational as that. Like, I need to have protected limited amount of speech so that ExxonMobil can continue to thrive.
But it was amazing to watch. I mean, the corporate mob, the woke mob yesterday in panic mode. I mean, you had literally accounts who were freaking out. I mean, I don't know if you saw this, but thousands of accounts were suddenly losing thousands of followers. I mean, the list was hilarious to watch. It turns out that a bunch of those bot farms that created fake accounts suddenly shut down. They ran for the hills, I guess maybe knowing that they would suddenly be exposed by their new owner. I don't know. But I mean, think about the quote unquote enlightened people who are on mainstream media, the Brian Stelters of the world, the MSNBC anchors. They all freaked out yesterday. So here's just an example. Here's just a sampling of some of the freak out moments we had. This was Brian Stelter yesterday on
Look.
Yeah, here he is. Here's Brian Stelter yesterday on CNN with a little bit of a freak out moment.
Who knows? I think that's an example of a broader question for Twitter, which is if you get invited to something where there are no rules, where there is total freedom for everybody, do you actually want to go to that party? Or are you going to decide to stay home? And that's a question for Twitter users. Some Twitter users might love the idea.
By the way, look at him in the middle there.
There's going
next to Allison. He's like, what are you even talking about?
Yeah.
He's like, are you seriously saying this right now? Look at Allison Camerata's face.
She's like, fun.
Really? You want to go to a party where when you show up at the party, they give you a list of rules? Like
that's like the Friends episode where she's like, everybody, you have to snap the markers shut or they will dry out. That's a fun party.
Yeah,
to be absolutely no moderation and no rules at all. Others might not want to be anywhere near that. Am I crazy, Matt?
No, you're right. And what happens to the advertising? I mean, if there's no moderation or little moderation, do the advertisers stay away? What does that do to the business prospects for Twitter itself?
Yeah,
I mean, there's literally a whole Friends episode about that where like Chandler's party is funner because there are no rules,
right?
And nobody goes to Monica's party. Hello.
Well, I mean, and just the lack of awareness. Lack of self-awareness. You literally just had CNN Plus collapse under the weight of $300 million in advertising that you pushed out the door that you couldn't even get 10,000 people to sign up for CNN Plus. Why? Because of this exact crap. I totally agree with you, Brian. I mean, who would want to go to a party where there's no rules? I mean, just think of the advertisers. What woke advertisers are going to want to promote themselves or have advertising on a Twitter that has no rules at all?
Well, you and I we both worked for mainstream media. I worked for NBC and CBS. Clayton worked for Fox News. Right. And people that we worked with and liked, right, are also having this reaction on Twitter. And I'm very surprised at former colleagues of mine feeling so threatened that sort of their monopoly on speech will be threatened.
Let me just say this. There is none of my former colleagues at Fox that I'm aware of. My old co-host, Tucker Carlson, he is absolutely not upset about this at all.
Well, a lot of my former colleagues at NBC are.
Yes. And I will say, though, to agree with you in part, there is this contingent, because Natali and I both used to cover technology in our, on the side for our different networks. I would cover technology as well as anchor the news for Fox News in my days in New York City. And Natali was a tech correspondent at one point in her career as well. And so I have been stunned, actually. I'm just going to say this. I have been absolutely really disappointed and actually stunned at the lack of, or sort of the coverage of this Twitter story, the lack of discussion from them about free speech, and even the coverage of censorship. I've been really stunned and actually really disappointed in companies that I used to have a lot of respect for, like The Verge, for instance, right? Here's a Verge post today. How to deactivate your Twitter account.
I mean, I've seen a lot too that are like how to download your stuff, and where the heck are you going to go? Like, what are you going to do with all of those tweets?
I mean, and then journalists that I had a lot of respect for when I was a tech reporter and would cover these companies. And I'm just seeing these voices that are like, this is awful. Like, here's Jeff Jarvis from CUNY University. And, he wrote the book, What Would Google Do? The book on Google, where he loves Google and fawns over Google. And he writes this: today on Twitter feels like the last evening in a Berlin nightclub at the twilight of the Weimar Germany. Really?
That's very hyperbolic.
Here's Max Boot. I'm frightened by the impact on society and politics if Elon Musk acquires Twitter. He seems to believe that on social media, anything goes. For democracy to survive, we need more content moderation, not less.
Yes.
Here's another one. If Elon Musk successfully purchases Twitter, it could result in World War III and the destruction of our planet. I think the reason I'm so upset about a lot of these tech reporters is because they have the ability to marshal themselves, right? And really, I mean, we've seen moves in Congress that have been stifled because of the tech press.
Yes.
And the Twitterverse and social media saying, absolutely not. We will not stand for this type of legislation. And it gets shut down.
Yes.
And suddenly these old congressmen who are walking around with dementia are like, oh, my office got thousands of phone calls in 2 minutes yesterday. And I didn't know what I was supporting. And I got to look further into this stuff because there's a lot of pissed people calling my office.
Okay. He's playing by the current rules of engagement, right? I mean, whether the SEC steps in, I had this thought, like, is this even going to be allowed? But okay. I liked this tweet from Stephen L. Miller. Said, Musk hasn't even said what he's going to change about Twitter. All he said is he is a firm believer in free speech, and they lost their minds. This free speech has now become something that is threatening just the idea of it, because so what does that tell you? If you don't like the term free speech, it means you like limiting speech to things that you only like to hear. Elizabeth Warren, though, she rang in on this, and I think this is interesting. She says this deal is dangerous for our democracy. Billionaires like Elon Musk play by a different set of rules than everyone else, accumulating power for their own gain. We need a wealth tax and strong rules to hold big tech accountable. Okay. Have you met Jeff Bezos? Because he's got similar power.
Don't you love the steaming pile of shit that is the hypocrisy that pours out of these members of Congress's mouth? Like, you really playing by a different set of rules? You mean how you get to invest in stocks and know about movements that are happening before the rest of the American people do? In fact, you actually do better than the hedge funds that trade many of these stocks. Your performance in Congress, because you are privy to information that we are not. You want to talk about playing by a certain set of rules and the amount of money that you take from these lobbyists that drive you in a certain way. I mean,
but this is a different side of an argument that really has bothered me, is like, well, he had 45 billion and he decided not to end climate change or solve world hunger or cure cancer or whatever. Like, this was his choice, right? But this was his 44 billion that he raised. And if money is really an energetic choice, this is where he decides to put his energy because he believes in it, right? So when you go and collect in terms of either your own money or financing, $45 billion, $44 billion, then you decide what to do with your energetic currency, right? And Elizabeth Warren has the same opportunities to go and collect, because a lot of it's financing, right? Collect this $44 billion and then she can decide. So she's saying that they're playing by a different set of rules. That's just absolutely not true. We all have the opportunity to do it, just most of us have not.
Here's Elon Musk's tweet about it. He says, the extreme antibody reaction from those who fear free speech says it all.
Yes.
Like, doesn't it? And by the way, here's Glenn Greenwald. In mainstream liberal culture, there isn't even a pretense any longer of believing in free speech, not even lip service paid to it.
Yes, isn't that crazy? I just can't believe where am I?
Yeah, it's increasingly vilified as an inherently fascist and racist concept, which is why, as laughable as this is, it's drearily common. And he goes on to say, the people who claim most flamboyantly to be fighting fascism and to save democracy are the same people who crave a union of state and corporate power to silence their enemies and censor ideas they dislike without the slightest self-awareness of the tension. Isn't that true? And I think this speaks to this. I found this today, Ari Melber over on MSNBC. So we have CNN, who's like, how can you have a party like this? It's going to be with no rules. Who would want to go to a party like this? And then you have Ari Melber over on MSNBC, a totally other network, who made this comment without any self-awareness about mainstream media and what they did to silence certain candidates during the last election.
You own all of Twitter or Facebook or what have you. You don't have to explain yourself. You don't even have to be transparent. You could secretly ban one party's candidate or all of its candidates, all of its nominees, or you could just secretly turn down the reach of their stuff and turn up the reach of something else. And the rest of us might not even find out about it till after the election.
That's happening to us who are watching you right now. In fact,
imagine if that were to happen.
It's happening.
I mean, I know that's the point of the soundbite. It's absurd. It's
in
this
fact,
lack
this
of
article just this month on Jacobin Magazine points out how CNN and other media outlets are bringing on ex-military experts, right, to talk about our pro-war agenda, right, and not pointing out that these people are now representatives of Raytheon, or they have these contracts with their current beneficiaries of weapons making companies, but CNN is putting them on and they're just titling them like former Secretary of Defense, former national security analysts, right? But they are current people who benefit from war. We are supposed to get transparency about who is speaking to us and what their dog is in the fight. We're not getting that. So, the media can go pound sand because they're doing exactly those things that they're so afraid of regular people will do on Twitter.
You're cracking me up.
Thank you, Brian. We should be cracking you up. Also, this was on The View today, which is Sunny Hostin, who is also upset about this. So you've got MSNBC, you've got CNN that's upset about it, you've got The View that's upset about it, and all of woke Twitter is just terrified.
And in fact, on Twitter, it is predominantly straight white men. So when Elon Musk says, wow, this is about free speech, it seems to me that it's about free speech of straight white men. And so let them have it. Let them just go at it. I enjoy the block button on Twitter. I think it has a real outsized influence in our world because politicians and celebrities are on it.
Okay. Well, I mean,
so Twitter is just straight white men. That's all Twitter is.
Maybe that's the case.
And
we don't have a demographic breakdown of Twitter users.
I'm sure she does. Apparently she has all the data right in front of her.
Okay.
It's straight white men. Okay. Is that what it is? That's great.
And so, but she's saying it already wasn't representative of, that's, you can make a valid point from that because he is saying he thinks Twitter has become the de facto town hall. And so if she's saying it's only really straight white men who are speaking in the town hall, then that is a problem that another straight white man in the leadership position will not solve, but she doesn't give us a way to solve it. So sure, we could have that conversation. It's not necessarily absurd.
Well, here's some data for you, Sunny Holston, which is the partisan divisions have widened over a role of government tech firms in restricting misinformation. Here's a Pew Research study that shows where people come down. The U.S. government should take steps to restrict false information online, even if it limits freedom of info. Look who believes that it should. Democrats.
Yeah.
Overwhelmingly. And tech companies should take steps to restrict false information online, even if it limits freedom of information. Democrats, look at it's like a duck bill, right? It's like going up and up and up for Democrats. Like, what happened to Democrats? And so when I talk about shit libs, like, I'm a pretty progressive person, right?
Yeah.
And I think, like, what has happened to liberals and Democratic Party, like, to be lumped in with that steaming pile of garbage is literally what's running the show right now. These are the people running your government. These are the people running your networks. These are the people in your mainstream media. These are the people with blue checks on Twitter. I have a blue check on Twitter, but don't hold that against me. And these are the people that are being...
And you are a straight white man.
I am a straight white man. But hopefully I'm pretty open-minded, and I absolutely am a free speech purist. I absolutely...
But these are the people...
When President Trump, I know it was like not the popular thing to say among blue check liberals, but when President Trump was banned from Twitter, I said, this is wrong. I said it was wrong.
Yes, and I didn't agree. I was like, no, it's great. He's gone, you know?
She, couldn't stand him. And look, I'm not a fan of...
And now I feel differently because I did not see that this would be a slippery slope towards impacting speech.
But when you see where liberals come down on this, when you see Democratic-leaning liberals, where they come down on should the U.S. government take steps to restrict and should tech companies take steps to restrict, yes, they are in favor of that. And they are upset and on fire today.
Something that's interesting to me, just looking at that, if you were to ask the question, like, are you in favor of the government banning certain books from schools or banning books in general? I bet you that graph would flip.
Yes.
Yeah, it's a great point, right? Like, how can we have, because we've done stories here on the show about like the banning of books, right? Like,
Mouse.
Mouse is banned. Catcher in the Rye, we had the Edward Snowden book has been banned. And it's like, how can we got to stand for free public open libraries, and we should be able to read as much information as possible, only if it's the stuff that I want you to read.
Only in 100-year-old books, not in actual up to current events
totally
that we
fine.
don't want you to see, like Hunter Biden's laptop.
And I've just been so disappointed in the tech press. I really have. I've been so disappointed in my old tech friends who cover this stuff, to see them, change their Twitter handles and put in a Ukrainian flag and all of this stuff, and where they don't even cover the censorship story at all.
Yeah.
And it's because they can't. I mean, I get it, right? You write for Vox Media, you write for The Verge, you write for these companies. These billionaires have a narrative they want you to follow. And so, of course, The Verge is going to come out and ask you to, publish a story on how to deactivate your Twitter account. They want these types of stories published. And this is the narrative that the mainstream media is going to push.
Well, why don't they delete theirs first?
Right.
Yeah, great point.
You first. Goodbye. See you never.
Thank you so much for subscribing to our channel. We've been banned, we've been blocked, we've been censored. That's why we started our own website, to stay connected with you for free.
That's right. So head on over to redacted.inc and make sure you're connected with us. You can sign up again at redacted.inc, not .com.